Yeah, go for it.
All right.
I tried to get it to display the numbers. It couldn't. It's got like presenter mode, but it didn't show the slides.
It's got what?
It's got like a presenter mode, but oh my god. I thought I turned that off. I'm in snooze. Crazy. What's up, buddy? You getting in here?
I don't want to sit on this side of the stage.
That's fine.
Hey, welcome back to MAGcon. Cool. Wow, this is hot mic. Let me see. You got that? Oh, yeah, cool. All right. So I guess we'll get this started up. Basically, what's up for the next 2 hours on the schedule, it's not going to be 2 hours, is we're going to take what we hope is about half an hour to go over just like the most essential part of the research we've been doing on like culture and communications and stuff like that. Trying to focus on just the most practical stuff possible in the first half an hour, which is like the actual presentation. And then we'll break and it'll just be like a free form hangout. We can talk about this, we can talk about other stuff, whatever you guys want to do. So let's check it out. Yeah, so again, most essential stuff. Here we go. Okay, so the main goal of this is I want to give you guys practical tools to keep the humans together. It's sort of a difficult thing. Humans are tough. And I want to convince you that these topics are worth paying some attention to. Here's the thing, right? Like, basically, the amount of like technical and event running expertise in MAGFest is astounding. Like, if you compare this to similar organizations that struggle with the things that we can kind of solve in our sleep here, it's super impressive. And what basically I'm trying to talk about today is like the soft skills related to making everybody be happy and like getting along and stuff like that. And basically it's vaguely related to culture, but I would say it's also about conversations. And what I'm hoping is to give you guys some tools that basically you can practice. You can practice them like a skill. All right, so what is culture? Why does anybody care about it? Yeah, are you good? Are we? Okay, cool. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's fine. And this is sort of an optional session, so it's not a problem if people are skipping. Okay, so what's culture, right? So like one definition is how being a part of the organization feels as a staffer. So it's basically like you in relationship to the organization. Another way to look at it is it's like the vibe of MAGFest. And this is sort of like the magic that the attendees respond to so well that they can't really put their finger on. They don't quite know what's going on. They just love MAGFest. Great cultures can change the world. And basically, as far as this discussion goes, whatever the staff are feeling is what trickles down to the attendees. Like basically whatever mood you guys are in determines how well that translates out to the attendees. So my theory is basically if we mostly pay attention to the staff, everything else is gonna fall into place. So like here's just random examples of I don't know, sort of obvious looking awesome cultures. Yeah, that's a lot of Elon Musk. Yeah, so great cultures put a car in space and landed some boosters and nobody thought it was possible and it's totally awesome. Here's another culture. This is the DMV. You guys have probably been to a similar thing. It's fine, you know, you can fill out some forms, you can get shit done. It's kind of a drag, it's not very fun. So like, what's the difference between this and this? You know, they're both organizations, they both have employees and people and all that kind of stuff. So that's sort of what we're digging into. I think we want to be this. I don't really want to be this. Okay. So basically, I'm going to throw out a whole bunch of different perspectives on this and some tools. And they all sort of have the same objective, and they're like different ways of sort of doing the same thing. So I would encourage you guys at the end of this, if one of these like resonates with you, try it out and see how it goes. So let's talk about keeping the humans together. I mentioned, we do incredible things here, like the sort of operational stuff that people just kind of like are able to magically pull off like it's no big deal, and their incredible technical feats or event planning or organizational is pretty astounding. So despite that, we still have these sources of friction, and like what are the root causes of some of that friction? And as Eli has kind of pointed out for a bunch of other stuff, and some of the surveys we've been doing have been measuring things like communication gaps, behavior for staff, mismatched expectations, assumptions, plans fall through sometimes, it doesn't always quite go how you want. And that, that creates stress and amongst the volunteers and stuff like that. So like, I guess what I'm trying, there's a lot to say about that, but the one thing I really want to say is we want to create the environment where it's okay to make mistakes. And like mistake meaning that like if there's a problem and you were in good faith trying to work on something and it just kind of didn't work out, this is something we talked about with the values before a little bit, is basically we're trying to support people and their ability to make mistakes and learn from them. And basically, if we're out to do stuff that nobody's ever done before, and MAGFest is surely in that universe, we're going to screw up, like occasionally, or a lot. I don't know, one of those things. So basically, when you make mistakes, it can put a strain on your relationships with other staffers, and it's just a normal thing. We're humans. So why does that matter? Just take this following example. Two people have a good working relationship at MAGFest, and there's a problem. You might see a conversation like this, like, oh, hey, like, that's not quite right, or like, maybe I can help you do that a little better. And the other person's like, that is cool, thank you for taking the time, that's totally awesome. If two people are kind of like at each other's throats a little bit, it's like, oh, you screwed this up. You always mess it up. Like everything is terrible. And like the other person might be like, well, I'm not going to respond to that because that person is being obnoxious. It's not a great situation. So like basically, what I want to do is talk about like tools that you can use to maintain good relationships. And I hope some of this isn't too obvious or anything, but basically when you need that type feedback in a creative environment like ours, you got to be able to talk candidly for the best results. Like you can get by not doing that, but if you can exchange feedback really quickly and bounce ideas back and forth without a whole lot of judgment or anything, that's the kind of environment we want to create. Also, if you got a small team or you're in MAGFest or something like that, and we're trying to do something that really does change the world's going to punch back, right? So basically, when the external pressure of the world resisting the change tries to hit us, the only thing you're going to have to really fall back on is your relationships with your other staffers and everybody kind of having their own, each other's back. So if you have that environment, that's cool and it's super strong. If you don't have that environment, the whole thing could kind of fall apart when enough external pressure is applied. So I'm trying to answer the question, like, what are some ways to like create and more importantly, like maintain these kind of good relationships? And this brings me to something I've kind of talked about before, this concept of triads. So say you have two people. There's person A, person B. They have a relationship, they're good, everything's cool, they're friends or they're working together or whatever. Something happens, I don't know what, they get mad at each other and the relationship breaks and they don't want to talk to each other, they don't want to do anything to do with it. That guy's a jerk, this guy's a jerk. One thing you can do is if there's a third person that basically notices, this person and that person, they're not really talking anymore, what happened there, and they take it on themselves to go out and be like, all right, it's my responsibility to talk to that person, see if I can help resolve the situation, see what's going on with that. And this is called a triad because there's three people involved in this structure. The two of them have the relationship, one of them has the relationships back. Like basically this person, if something goes wrong here, they're like, it is my job to go and jump in here and try to fix this up. And even better if that's multiple people. So if like two people get in a fight or something or whatever, and a whole group of people are like, whoa, man, that's crazy that those two are now not talking to each other. We should jump in there. We should do some stuff. So if you can build basically like a network of these type of relationships, it basically becomes sort of self-healing over time. So, like, stuff is going to go wrong. People are going to get mad at each other. It's just friction. We're human, whatever. But if you have a network of relationships like this where other people, anytime something happens, there's like 5 people that are just like, oh, this is not good that these 2 people aren't talking. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to help that out. And you build these big networks. This is a super strong structure. And basically, this is what can really enact change, and it becomes kind of self-repairing over time. You know, this isn't like a structure where there's like somebody at the top or whatever, you know, has to get in there and do all this stuff. Like think of this almost like one of our departments. Like basically, this is kind of structure that we see a lot in MAGFest inside our own departments, Yeah, I guess one of the things in MAGFest that we can do is basically these networks, you can even envision them as like the departments themselves. So like if one department is like mad at another department, you know, there could be a person that jumps in and tries to repair that. There could be all kinds of stuff you can do. So I guess if you're going to take away sort of one thing from this, what I would ask is basically look around. If this rings a bell and you're like, oh, I know 2 people that like this fits perfectly, think about jumping in there and seeing, you know, just talk to them, be like, hey, can I help you out? What happened with that one person or this person or whatever? So own that relationship. Do it for like one person. See what kind of results you get. That's my call to action for triads. And we can take some questions. I just want to kind of get through a bunch of this. All right, so, and Eli, if you have anything to say, feel free.
I was just going to ask.
Here.
I was just going to ask, just quick show of hands. How many people in this room feel like you've been, you know, on one end or the other or in the middle of like a triad? You may not have used that term before, but like how many of you have been the person who's needed talking to or needed to? Yeah. Okay, so that's good. So yeah, I mean, a lot of what we're doing, this just kind of serves to underscore that part of what we're trying to do here is just give a language to talk about concepts that we're all like very familiar with, but that just kind of making that officially part of our culture and something that we can reference like when we do run into problems.
Yeah, naming things is powerful. Like, you know, if you name an animal, you have to own it forever. That's the rule, right? It's pretty much like that. So we're developing a network of vocabulary to apply labels to structures that aren't very intuitive if you don't know they exist. Yeah, try that. How's that? Cool. Okay, totally unrelated concept. This one's actually, I'm curious, this should be interesting. Perception is reality. All right, and we're going to start this with this. Your brain is an amazing lying machine, right? Basically, your perception, your experience of reality is an illusion created by your brain to fill in gaps of information you don't have. So like this is, I got to use some XKCD here. This is fun times. I'm going to kind of ignore the specifics of this, but I'm going to use an example of your eyes, specifically just human vision, like on a biological level. What's really interesting is if you look around, you think you have a nice clear picture of the room. You think, you know, oh, I'm seeing a nice clear vision. I can look at everybody. But the reality is a little different. The actual reality is you've just a tiny portion of the center of your eye is almost all of the resolution that you can actually see. And like, here's a fun experiment. So you can read this text. Everybody can like see this text right here. Look at me, and can you read the text on the projector? Yeah, it's like kind of blurry. It's kind of off to the side. Yeah, your brain is filling in the information. And what's actually happening is that like, your eye is randomly darting around the room. This is a picture of 2 seconds of eye movement as it sort of moves around the room, and your brain is filling in the gaps and building the picture based on the most important information. And now that I've said this, you probably can't like unsee it literally. So this is just sort of an example. And what, I mean, is this a trick? Is this bad? No, this is your brain giving you useful information based on ambiguous real-time signals and other stuff coming in. It's just filling in the gaps and works great most of the time, right? And so essentially your brain's building a model of your world. All models are wrong. Some models are useful. That's a statistician quote. So I'm going to give you another example, and this gets back more to our topic. Language, okay? Human brains build mental models of the world based on the language we hear and use to describe things. And basically, what we sometimes perceive as objective facts, like indisputable realities, are actually can be a subjective mental model that your brain builds about the world around you. And basically, your language that you hear or receive can create your own experience of reality. I'm trying not to get too meta on this, but let me just, a couple examples, okay, right? Some of these phrases, and I kind of picked these because I've seen some of these occasionally float around in MAGFest, but this is really not specific to MAGFest, this is anything. And you basically, like somebody says, oh, a declaration, this person is toxic, this department is incompetent, this organization is unwilling to do stuff, nothing gets done, nothing will change. And when you say stuff like this, what's interesting is like you are defining your own reality that basically, to you, might as well be objective fact. And like, it's just how human brains work. That's just what's up. If somebody else says that, like you can assume that their objective reality, that they think that these things are true. And it's kind of extreme, like I'm picking some intentionally extreme examples here of like language where this might be true. And this type of thing happens all the time with much more subtle, like much less obvious stuff. And okay, and basically the whole reason I'm bringing this up is you can have an awareness of this effect, and if you do, you can sort of take it apart. So like, suppose we say something like, oh right, okay, some other stuff before I talk about that. If you say a thing will never get better, repeating that can reinforce your mental model of how the world works. And essentially what that can do is it can create effectively almost like a set of sunglasses of like, oh, this person X over here is toxic. You're wearing those, and your brain will filter out contrary information that contradicts that belief. And it's just a thing human brains do. And basically all I'm trying to suggest with this is just like the more you're aware of it, the more you can do things about it. So like, what are some things you can do about it? Let's talk about some thought experiments. Say it's a statement, person X is toxic. So could you unpack that? Is there something you can do about that? And what you could do is reframe that. Is this your tautology? Am I right? I don't know. Joe? Okay, great, cool. Thanks for the vocabulary. Rephrased, you could just say, the same statement, same expression, but you're like, my perception, or like, I feel like, to me, this person's exhibiting toxic behavior. And basically, if you say like someone is toxic or something is like will never work, like you've closed doors to how you can approach that situation. And vice versa, if somebody's doing the same thing to you. And basically, if you phrase it as like, oh, my perception of this situation is, this person's exhibiting toxic behavior, then you got some more possibilities that open up to you. You could be like, what could the reasons be? Like, could this person be in a bad environment? Like, did we not set them up for success? Did their situation change and now they're dealing with a bunch of crap that they didn't think they had to deal with? Have they had previous experiences like this? I don't know, personal stuff, lack of training. There's a whole bunch of different scenarios where perhaps there's a different possibility than the most sort of immediate one that your brain jumps to. Another one, basically, it's very simple for your brain to fill in the gaps about the intentions of a person. It's like, oh, why is this person doing this? Like, it seems like they're being obviously malicious or just, like obviously their intention is to cause me problems or this person, or they just don't agree with this or whatever. So I guess all I'm kind of saying here is like, just by the simple act of rephrasing the statement, you can open up all these other possibilities. And if one of them happens to be something you can do about or work with or work on the situation, you've basically opened up some more doors to getting past sort of frustrating conversations. And we've all kind of run up against that wall, right? It's like you're talking to somebody, you're just like, oh man, no matter what I do, I can't get through to this person, and like it sucks, and I don't know what else to do. This is just like kind of a what else to do. Yeah, it's just kind of about options. So here's my one easy trick to, just with this one easy trick, click here, definitely not spam. Take anything you want to say and just try this transform, which is basically just say, to me, like my experience of this, it feels like whatever it is, or it feels like you are doing something you are doing some action to me when this happens. It basically just means prefixing with like, I feel like this, or my perception is this. And it's so stupid because we've just started kind of doing this more regularly, like being more aware of this, like, I don't know, on a board level or a few other things. And it works. It's crazy. Like, I'm so frustrated that this is the dumb thing that has probably improved MAGFest culture more than almost anything else we've done so far. So just, I don't know, just like some other examples of like untangling language a little bit. I mean, you guys kind of get the point here. It's just like, saying in terms of my subjective experience, this is what's up. And when you do this and another person does it, then you have the option to have more possibilities. It's kind of cool. So another couple of other clues that maybe you can untangle the language a little bit is if you have people are like, oh, this always happens, or this never happens, or nobody thinks that, or everybody thinks that this is true. Like those should be your clues to be like, all right, is there something more to unpack here? Are there other possibilities for people's intentions or what they're thinking about, or is there other ways I can work on this? Yeah, this is just same thing, really. Just my call to action is just think about this, and if it seems like it could be useful in your situation, just try saying, my perception is blah, 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 or I feel that, whatever. Or, and then advanced mode here is if somebody says like those kind of statements to you, they're like, oh, you are a toxic person, or this or that. See if you can reinterpret that in your head, put your own filter on it that's like, oh, their perception is that I'm exhibiting this behavior, or they feel that whatever, and then see if that opens up some other possibilities to blind spots that you might have, and then you can do work to work on this. This is a topic we talk about a lot in with the event leadership and other folks like that. I hope it brings you some success in untangling situations, and it's just sort of another tool in that vein. Anything else to add to that, Eli? No, I'm good. Cool. Does that like make any kind of sense? I don't know. All right, cool. Good. I'm trying to blast through this as fast as I can for you. Okay, so let's talk about some core values. This is like a shade of a deep dive on where we've been talking about with the core value stuff. And I'm not going to go super specific into each one or anything like that. Just sort of like, what are our core values? Why? Why do we even care about these? And basically, there's a series of like beliefs about the organization that folks can align on, and if they're following that, it's sort of a roadmap of like the right way to do stuff. And what we mean by that is that if you look at the mission, make the world a better place with video games, right? We do that by running events. But what are the parameters for the events, right? Like, should we have sponsorship? Should we charge $1 million for the ticket? Like, should it be a smaller or bigger thing? There's a whole bunch of valid decisions about how you can run an event that result in a valid event that would kind of not feel like the way we've been running MAGFest. Basically, doing something different from that doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just not the way that MAGFest does it. So let me get like practical example. This is a little bit more of a deep dive on what Nick was saying. For advertising, right? Like, why don't we have sponsors or like have an expo? That's money in our tank. Like, that's awesome. We could probably double or triple the revenue with very little effort and not have to do a whole lot of extra stuff. And if you look at one of the core values that was presented earlier today, participation, right? You create the event, you create what you want to see at the event. So like a test you could apply is like, okay, should we bring in like Mountain Dew or Doritos or something like that? And like one of the tests we apply is like, okay, is this what we want in the event? So much that even if they weren't giving us money for their presence, we would have them anyway. And if the answer is no, then we don't do it. If the answer is like yes, then maybe we don't even take their money and we just invite them in. We're like, oh, you were such a core part of MAGFest, you should get in here. And here's the interesting thing, right? The core values basically describe particular decisions. And here's another organization, GamerX, that had this to say about advertising. So GamerX is like an LGBT-focused gaming con out on the West Coast. And those guys have a ton of advertising, right? And I asked them about that once, and they're like, oh, we want big corporations to sign their name to our cause. And I was like, oh, that is brilliant, right? Because it's sort of like they have to stand with you if they're advertising at the thing. So they were like, let's get as many ads as we can in there. So it's like a different example of taking this, this create what you want to see at the event and like inverting it for a different use, and it still kind of holds true. And that's sort of, yeah, I'm just going to gloss over this slide. Nick already said it, like a value of don't murder your coworkers is not a value because if you reverse it, it's not a valid decision. I love that example. It's like the most obtuse thing. I don't know. I can't run an organization where like it's important to murder your coworkers. That's probably not something.
Not for very
that,
long, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, not a sustainable one.
Right.
I mean, another good example. Coworkers.
That's true. So, I mean, another example of like a reversible value that I think is very near and dear to a lot of people here is, if you compare MAGfest to Comic-Con. Right? So like Comic-Con famously started off as like a comic book convention, and then eventually they were like, hey, let's just make it like a pop culture thing where there's a lot of comic book stuff, but mostly people go to like meet the cast of Glee or whatever. And look, that is a perfectly fine thing. Like I don't think that Comic-Con like sold out or that they did anything wrong by doing that. And you could even argue that they did a lot of good for like mainstreaming and normalizing comic books by doing that. But we are not looking to make that decision with MAGfest. Like we have kind of rules of thumb about like what and how much non-video game, like non-gaming stuff do we want like at MAGfest. and I think even and I mean and this is something that we play with, and this is something that can differ like somewhat between events. I mean, obviously, like Labs has branched out, and I think like this continues to be very contentious. I had someone who was like a longtime MAGfest staffer who I respect very much, who like told the board of directors this year, MAGfest is not a music and gaming festival anymore, because there's just so much non-music and gaming stuff there that it just doesn't even feel like that's, we've totally lost our soul. And I'm like, wow, okay. I mean, disagree strongly, but, I definitely see why someone would think that. It's certainly gone up.
And you know what? Perception reality, right?
Yeah.
Who are we to say that that's not true to that person?
Sure.
Yeah, and I guess another thing, like, okay, take one of something implied.
Sorry,
yeah.
Yeah,
what's up?
I don't know what you guys, like, I'm sure you think about this, like Pepsi guy.
Yeah.
We have a guy that from Pepsi corporate that brings in a ton of drinks every year.
Sure.
And he does that as a sponsorship / like charitable donation. Like it's an example of a good partnership because they don't want us to do any branding. They just say we just want to give you a bunch of drinks.
Yeah. That's a good, and he was saying that the example is Pepsi just donating product to MAGfest. Yeah, that's a good deal for us, and we're not sacrificing anything we're not putting up Pepsi banners all over the place or anything like that. So yeah, good work.
Yeah.
It's fine. And like, it's interesting, right? Because it frames the advertising thing. It's not like we're anti-corporate. It's just like we want to make good deals that, further the mission of MAGfest. And if it doesn't do that, why will we have it? And I guess the other example I wanted to make here about the values versus the truism. So a truism is something, if you invert it, that the decision makes no sense. So we say in our core values and a bunch of other stuff, we imply like it's okay to make mistakes, right? But if you're like Boeing or Airbus and you're designing aircraft, it's not really okay to make mistakes. You don't want every flight to be practice for the next one. Basically, yeah. Well, look, nobody's Elon Musk. I'm not Elon Musk. Nobody is. That's
Right,
so true.
exactly.
Right. It's okay to make mistakes as long as there's not a human on that rocket. Yeah, that's fine. It can hit the ground at 300 miles an hour. Yeah. So basically, yeah, this is part of the core values stuff is like the original sort of mojo that made the event work translated into a form that everybody can use to make your own decisions about the event and get something that the end result feels like MAGfest. And this is going to be super important as we build new communities and stuff for like MAGWest and for other events out there, that basically if they have this, the core values list, it's like a roadmap for what kind of decisions they can make. And using, the theory would be using just the core values and some guidance that they can independently and autonomously make an event that feels like MAGfest, but it might be a totally different different thing. Like, I think Labs is doing that, right? Like, you guys are taking our like core values stuff and putting your own twist on it, and it feels like MAGFest, but the content is super different, and you're trying out all this new stuff. And like, that's the kind of thing we want to see in all the events. Like, anything new or starting, that's, I think, the sign that the event is going well, that the creators are able to like go out and do crazy stuff. Look at this. Oh man, it's 6:30. Okay, great. This is it. This is the end. This is the last slide. I said 30 minutes. I just wanted to hit like super essentials. Cool. And from here on out, that was the part I kind of wanted everybody to see. Everything from here on, we're just going to take like literally an hour and a half, nosh on some pizza, and like just have kind of a free form whatever about core values, or I think Eli's got some stuff to, oh, you have some stuff to present.
Well, I do, I mean.
Yeah, we can do it as the next part, that's fine.
Well, yeah, but I'd rather take questions.
Okay, yeah, and we can take some questions and stuff like that. So consider from here on out to be optional, and we will go ahead and take some questions. What's up? Anybody? We're going to take questions. Everything from here on
just stuff you want to talk
is
about.
optional.
All right,
we
well,
can talk about
Hachi
this stuff or anything like it, or different stuff.
Yeah, or different stuff.
Yeah, and you can feel free to roam around or do whatever you want. And pizza should be here pretty soon.
Yeah.
Hachi.
So I guess I haven't finished processing the core values. They're not in the form that I expected them to be at all, because they've got like headers and then stuff underneath. Versus like all this stuff we're talking about, like mom forget market and stuff that are just like more bite-sized.
Yeah.
Is the word game nowhere on our core values?
I think, well, okay. So it's actually part of the mission statement, and the core values are in service of the mission statement. So make the world a better place with video games by living by these values, I think is the...
Because then that makes it, I thought when the values were published, it would be harder to put, I mean, you guys are talking about labs, but I'm talking about stock too.
Yeah.
Even to a bigger extent, like into the core values, but now it's like almost too easy to fit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that actually is an interesting question for the room. I'd be curious to know what people think. I mean, like how, like, should we be talking about gaming, like, in the core values? I mean, because, like, certainly gaming is a pretty big part of all MAGFest events, even, you know, like stock and labs.
Yeah.
I mean, this is more of a question for the room. I'm just wondering if anyone has any, like, yeah.
I feel like the core values don't need to be gaming focused, but gaming should be the mission. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
we achieve something with these values and this type of discipline and this type of MO of doing things. And that's how you do it, but what you do is to like further video games.
Sure.
Sure.
I mean, when you consider about the whole spectrum of MAGFest and what it provides and what it offers, it might be possible that someone could go to MAGFest and not be involved in any active gaming at all.
Sure.
But they might still enjoy MAGFest and participate in those core values. But I do see the core values as sort of just a testament, not necessarily of what MAGFest provides for. Well, I guess it is kind of a testament for what they provide for the attendees, but through the people who work.
Right. So it's like the how and not the what. Kind of, yeah. Rob.
Yeah, so this is more of like maybe a question or topic for discussion, but if we go back to what your definition of a value it's something that can be reversed and still have meaning. Like, how would we work gaming into that definition?
Well, gaming is potentially a value in the sense that, like, it would be perfectly valid to say, for an organization such as MAGFest to say, like, we are only interested in gaming-related content. Like, when the 501st Stormtrooper Battalion, like, asks if they want to come to MAGFest, we say, no, we don't care about the work you're doing for, like, sick kids. You are not gaming. Right? I mean, like, and, you know, and, like, literally, like, we got not a lot of complaints, but, like, there were legit, like, people at MAGFest. They're like, what? Why are they here? That's not gaming. And, you know, and so I think it would be perfectly valid to do that one way. And at the same time, it would be perfectly valid for an organization like MAGFest to go the Comic-Con route and say, we started off as a gaming thing, but actually we just want to make the world better, and maybe we'll start up events that have nothing to do with gaming. I don't think we're interested in doing that, but I do think that that does mean that gaming is potentially a core value. Like, you know, we could build a core value around that, but so far we haven't, and that's why I was asking to see like what do people think about that one way or the other. Yeah.
There that is more appropriate to the specific core values that we've been talking about. Somebody said over here that it was already like discussed in one of the MAGcon things, but I want to see something on the screen that feels actual.
Yeah.
Should I just pull up the
Nick's
document?
slides.
The document is like tiny URL.
It's in general right now. It's like the third thing.
Yeah, just go to general and open it, and Nick has a slide that is.
Interesting point about this idea of mentioning gaming in the core values. Like kind of the idea is that the mission is supposed to be like what we're after and values are how we're doing. That tribal leadership book that Don's been very about for 2 years. Like the three biggest companies in it, Amgen is a biotech firm, doesn't say anything about medicine as core values. Zappos, the shoe company, doesn't say anything about shoes as core values. Rickon, the hospital, doesn't say anything about medical care or healthcare as core values. It's all about how they accomplish that mission.
So real quick, sorry if I missed this earlier. Who ended up finalizing the core values? Was it the BOD?
Yeah, it was kind of a collaborative process all the way at the end. So it was mostly, I'd been hacking on this for a very long time. I've run this through Paul and through BOD meetings and stuff like that. This is like the 6th or 7th generation of this document. And then basically we had a meeting about 2 weeks ago where me, Nick, Paul, and Ashley went through here and like hammered this. And then basically this final version had some final tweaks that Nick and Ashley did, and that's the actual version you guys are
Also,
looking at.
just the word final does mean
Final,
the
right.
final 1.0 version, like suitable for like initial release. Like this is not at all necessarily the final version. There
Yeah.
can be a 1.1, a 2.0. I mean, which is part of why we're having this discussion, because I think there are questions like, hey, you know, video games aren't mentioned. Like, how do people feel about that and such? That
Yeah, if these are the values, they're not going to change much. But if there are things through this discussion and other discussions over time, we might iterate on these a little bit. Like hopefully, like the sign that these are good is they don't change all that much. But yeah, we'll see what's up. Yeah. Oh wait, sorry. You do the point.
yeah, Joe had his hand up for a while.
If we make gaming content a core value for MAGfest, Labs is done. I mean, there's actually no way to fulfill the mission that Labs is trying to do with a caveat that a lot of the content has to be gaming, because there's a tech tree that has to happen where you have to be straight up making things in order to get to a point where you can make things that are related to video games.
Sure. Yeah, and,
Sure.
and that might suggest that if there was a core value that related to gaming, maybe it would have something to do with fun or play or something, and not gaming specifically. And what you're calling out is indeed one reason why we kind of didn't put that in the initial version, is because, I mean, and it's not just for Labs, it's because there's been stuff at the main Super event like for years that we really like, but that isn't like strictly gaming related.
The other thing is, I just realized when I was like, the format doesn't is different than what I expected. It's hard for me to explain this. These are core values about creating events versus like what MAGfest stands for. Does anyone else see what I mean? Like, it's all about putting on the event and how we're gonna do it versus like what people are going to experience when they come to an event. And it seems like a big change from what I was expecting.
Yeah, and I think that's because MAGfest is not inherently an organization that builds events. And I mean, I will get into that a little bit later, but I don't think that MAGfest has to be an organization that is limiting itself to making the world a better place through video games by making video game events. It doesn't have to be that at all.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. Yeah.
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 I mean, like stock is one of my favorite like things to do in the year, and there's stuff that I like. Is the slip and slide a game? Like, I don't know, not really. Like, I mean, I immediately regret bringing this up. Oh my god. now the entire rest of the evening is going to devolve into, is X a game?
Nobody tell the IRS.
Right. Yeah. No. But I see what you're saying.
It's just like, it's more about creating Mag stock than what Mag stock stands for.
Sure.
Like, did you consciously decide to do that with the core values? It's more about
Yes.
creation versus the experience.
Yeah.
This is, if I can hit your question from a few angles, for one thing, this is ideally a guideline for everyone who's working on MagFest to serve as a way to help you make decisions. If you have a hard decision that you're looking at, and you're kind of torn on it, and you're like, okay, do I go with the moon bounce, or do I spend that money on this band? You should be able to take difficult decisions and look at the core values and say, okay, let's go back to basics. What are we here for? This spells it out. Okay, that makes the decision obvious. Here we go. That's probably the primary intent of this as a document, is to serve as sort of like a philosophical guideline for how we all want to be running these events and doing the things that we're doing, so that we can all refer back to them as a guide for doing this stuff. And that's probably the main reason why, and I mean, I agree with you, it seems much more internally focused than externally. This is not about what people should be experiencing when they come to MagFest. This is about what we should be doing to create that experience.
But all the conversations I were in were about public-facing core values. Like, I don't assume we don't want
I
to
feel like
make
it's
public-facing core values,
it's about the
but
creation.
shouldn't we make those too?
I feel like it's about the creation and the maintenance of the feel of the event, but you can't, we can't build a document, nobody in this room can build a document saying, when you come to MagFest, you're gonna feel this way. Or when you go to MagStock.
Which you'll be treated with respect.
No, well, I mean,
Fine.
that's
Like-
stuff, where I understand what you're saying, like, you're gonna be respected, you're gonna be treated as a peer, that kind of stuff. But those, while maybe not in practice, should be more of like humanity goals, not MagFest goals specifically, you know what I mean? And like, I feel like these lead, like what Paul was saying, it's a good baseline for where you can start and potentially end making decisions. It's, if you follow or at least reference these kind of core values, you know that the decisions that you're making, choices that you're making for your individual events are going to fit the needs or desires or forward-thinking goals of the organization as a whole, not just specifically for your event. But it's also like literally impossible for you to be like, when you come to MagFest, you're gonna have a super good time, because you know what? That might not be true from someone.
Yeah, but and actually, let me clarify, just respond to something that you said, because I think you're right, that a lot of our discussions about this over the last like 2 years have been in the form of like, hey, what makes MagFest special? Like when people show up to a MagFest event, then MagFest has a different vibe, a different feel than like other events. And, you know, and not even necessarily in a way that's better or worse, but just that is different. And so that really was the starting point that we took to say like, okay, yeah, so what does make MagFest special? And then from there, we worked backwards to be like, okay, so now, like, what values do we have to have for ourselves, like for just the general volunteer staff, in order to continue like creating and preserving and maintaining that kind of vibe and that kind of feeling.
If I could just give a quick comment on that too. Sorry, I know, Charles. So let's do it. Okay, MagFest 5, I was an attendee, right? I just came to the event. At the end of it, I emailed somebody on the forum. Paul responded. I was like, hey, I got this idea, this jam space thing. I don't know. Could we do it? And he's like, okay, here's a room. And throughout the year, I was like, hey, Paul, what should I do here? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? I don't know. Brendan, should I do this thing or should I do this other thing? And they were like, oh, you know what? If it was me, I would do it this way or I'd do it that way. And like essentially without having something like this written down, those guys were defining the values of MagFest at the time. And basically, it would be interesting if I had this document, 10 years ago, if a lot of the decisions would end up being the same. And I think we finished this doc when that would be true. And I think you could just give this to attendees. Like, I mean, a lot of attendees would be like, wait, why do I need these core values for attending an event? What the hell is that about? But you get some folks like, I don't know, like everybody in this room. Ooh, something go out. There we go. Where if you were just like, hey, you, attendee, own your experience and create what you want to see at the event, there's going to be at least a handful of people that you could talk to at MAGfest that would just be like, okay, cool, what do I do? How do I do that? And they'll just jump right in, and you can be like, look at this, look at our onboarding stuff, jump in here, do cool things. And we'd have like 10 more people in this room next year. So like, even though I don't think they're necessarily super useful for like random public attendees just coming in here, we like want to break down, you know, just like we said here, break down the barriers between what's the difference between attendee, a staff, a guest, or whatever, and basically just contribute to MAGfest in their own way. So I think these would resonate with random attendees walking in off the street, even though it's not exactly for them, but we're trying to make everything kind of be the same between attendee and staff, volunteer, and that kind of thing. So.
Everybody in this room is making basically like a garden, and like we can't control where the plants grow or how they grow. Plants are what makes the garden like being a garden. So the document's not is for everybody here and the people that are working for you guys to know, or I don't want to say how to know, but like to get guidance on how to set the garden up so that when it is populated with plants and everybody coming in, that it is the best garden that it could be. Well, I like that analogy.
It's cool.
Yeah, we are the gardeners, the attendees are the plants. Yeah.
Landscaper, I need to add on.
Damn it, Beal.
Because that is an excellent analogy, but the only thing that I disagree with is that you can create the shape and the growth habit of each individual plant and cultivate it so that Japanese maples like they have out there, you can get a certain structure and like work on what you want. So I think that is an excellent analogy and just needed to add that on because you can build up individual parts.
But if we did that, it would not be MAGfest. We like
No, the plant garden would not
Well,
be MAGfest.
yeah.
Well,
we want the tree to grow the way the tree is going to grow. Like there are other events where people are going to like start pruning it off and getting it to go exactly in this ridiculous shape that like looks really cool. But like MAGfest is a continual mess of like the garden. It's going to have weeds, and we're okay with there being weeds. In our, I don't know. I'm okay with there being weeds in the MAGfest garden, just as long as they're not like totally taking over. They kind of,
Well, here's a concrete example, actually, that I think would be instructive, is that, like, in the state of Maryland, unlike Virginia, we do have the option of saying people can bring alcohol into, like, kind of public hotel areas, right? And so that's a decision that we get to make is, do we say, yeah, you know what, you can just drink, like, wherever, you know, just like in the hallways outside the concert or in the concert or whatever, and we decide, you know, in this case, no, we do not want that for a variety of reasons.
oh, wow.
Core values wheel keeps on spinning.
Yeah.
the thing about the core values discussion is this is absolutely living value.
Yes. This is version 1.0, but
So basically, it's its own sentient being, right? So, like literally.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I like the discussion.
It's actually funny you mention it's kind of like a living document language. I was actually going to make the comparison that the core values are kind of like the Constitution, where it may not be the be-all end-all. You know, every single law that is in the United States is not written in the Constitution, but it is at the very least the standard, and then you build on that. You know, there's the Constitution, which is the highest thing, and then on that you build the laws, on that you build regulations. It's a multi-layered cake in some ways. If we keep on throwing metaphors out the window.
It's a garden cake constitution.
That randomly grows weeds. But it is it needs to grow and evolve. But
Right.
the point
It's an
about that
evolving garden cake
is,
constitution.
you know, it may not have everything. It may not be necessary for every attendee to know that this is a core value. But like the Constitution, most people don't read it anyways. So it doesn't matter, as long as we have a stance that we can go back to, like, if there, it will be useful for, if we have a situation where a staffer does something, a major thing, but it may be in violation of our core values, that's where the board has to take a stand and say, this major thing is against our core values, we can't do it, or we're going to change our core values to accommodate this major thing.
Yeah, and in fact, I agree with all that, and I'll even note something that I think we forgot to say is that we've talked on the board of directors about, hey, maybe now that we have this 1.0 document, something we might start trying at future board meetings is anytime we have to make a decision, is there a core value that we can point to that says, you know, not that determines the decision, but if we talk about it and we're like, okay, now is that decision that we made in line with the core values, then maybe we look at that. And if we're like, I don't know, this just isn't anywhere on there, then either, you know, the decision, like maybe it was just a decision about something that's kind of not relevant, or maybe we need to make an update to the core values. And that's like kind of a thought experiment is like, should it be the case that every decision we make about anything should tie in some way to the core values or not?
Scribbles wrote something pretty good. I want to kind of get your intro to this here. I'm not sure how many events people in here attend. I guess I'm like, show of hands.
Yeah, for the stream.
Oh, we're still streaming? Oh, yeah.
Still streaming.
Oh, shit. Okay. Actually, show of hands. Who attends 2 or more events, gaming events, outside of MAGFest a year?
Gaming events outside of MAGFest.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you mean like a gaming event?
Well, like conventions.
Okay.
Conventions or expos. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of mixed. So,
Let the record show that like maybe a third of the room.
I went to GDC for the first time this year, and I tell you, it's not until I go to non-MAGFest events that I really learn to appreciate MAGFest events and how different they are. And you know, the GDC is very much a presentation of, the Game Developers Conference. It's like E3 except for developers, I suppose. Kind of simplification, but it's definitely a curation of things that the Expo company has decided to show you. And so, like from content wise, it's definitely a presentation to you. But an interesting thing is that the conference associate program at GDC, the CA, is kind of like world renowned for being like the tightest ship in volunteer management.
Sorry. I was just going to say CA program is their volunteer program.
Yes. And I've been meaning to study for a while. I'm going to get Scribble's thing first after we get to you. Sorry. And they're amazingly well trained, super regimented in where they are and when they're supposed to be there. They have all this documentation, and I'm like, wow! Like if only they have training sessions in the morning and like retrospectives in the evening after every event. I'm like, God, it's like, is there any way we can get that kind of training at MAGFest? Make sure everyone's on the same page all at the same time, which we're still striving for. But when I was actually there and I saw what the CAs actually do, I realized just how limited it was what the CAs are trusted with. They're basically like walking info kiosks, maybe give assistance to vendors and such. And it definitely, it's both the content that the company presents, Expo company presents, and the participation of the volunteers in it are really show how different it is. And Scribbles, you want to come read what you wrote?
Can I just mention too, we're comparing a lot of other events, and it's not trying to throw shade around. It's just looking at other stuff.
Yeah, totally.
It's a perfectly valid business model.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, hi folks, I'm Scribbles. I just got here, so I made sure I got things right. What I see in every volunteer's eyes when I'm here in any MAGFest event is who they're being. Most conventions aren't about being, they're about observing. You can unite with friends about something you observe television shows, movies, books, manga. In almost all of those cases, you are uniting around something that you're on the sidelines watching. Video games aren't about watching. You don't watch Link defeat the monsters. For the time you are playing, you are Link. That's your Master Sword. When MAGFest is done right, even first-time attendees feel like it's their MAGFest. It's why so many people feel compelled to volunteer. They want more of that feeling of being a MAGFester. This has been amazing for MAGFest in so many ways, but also contributes to a culture of going too far and overworking yourself as you continue to try to be more, and as being is what we do here. And I have more analysis on that, but that's like the first part.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know,
Scribbles has been an awesome sounding board
Yeah,
for
man.
this type of discussion too. So thanks,
I
man.
really like that analysis, and I have encountered before the idea that like one of the things that makes video games special as an art form is that you're participating and you're actually the one doing things as opposed to watching a movie. I never, until this moment, got the link between that and like how we run MAGFest as an event. That's awesome. No, dude, I mean, like after 15 years, my mind is still being blown. That's awesome.
What's up?
If I may,
You may.
I think we should refocus the discussion, which is on that. But I think I personally, and maybe show of hands, I think we need public core values, and that's what I thought we were working on for 2 years. I'm not upset.
Sure.
I think these are awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't have time to digest them.
Right.
At first glance, they look great, but at some later date, I really think we should have the core values that I thought we were going for the last 2 years.
Sure, and I guess one question, and this is, I mean, and I am curious to hear what others in the room think, is, you know, I certainly have been kind of thinking of these as like, you know, the volunteer, like the core values for volunteers. I mean, like to your point, right? Like, which means that although, like Dom said, you know, in theory, you know, you could show these to the attendees and be like, hey, this is what we're all about, but, you know, it wouldn't, like, it is a very different document than what you're talking about. And yeah, and I think I agree with you, just personally, speaking for myself.
It's interesting. And the thought experiment I would love to talk to you about it. It's just like, how would the public core values be different from this document? Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean...
And then should that just be this document, basically?
I think that's a conversation that needs to
Sure.
happen a bunch, and obviously, like, I'm happy to talk to you about that. My immediate two thoughts about that are, we have a code of conduct, which is kind of that,
Look,
but yeah. And
Yeah.
two, right there in the middle, participation, break down barriers between staff, guests, attendees. This should be for everybody, and it's about how to build MAGFest. And if somebody's just there to observe MAGFest, then like that's cool. We take their money, they see shows, whatever. Like I don't think we're the what do I say? Okay, if somebody's just there to observe, if somebody's just there to attend MAGFest and not participate in any way, they're not going to read any values. They're not going to care. They're not a part of this process, really. That's like, have you ever read the core values when you go to see a concert? You know, you want to go see your favorite band. Do you give a shit about what the AV company is doing behind the scenes? No, like watch the band and get out.
I do.
Yeah.
This is very much about how we build the event, and it should work on all levels for anybody who's participating, even down to the attendees who are becoming a part of it. As sort of what Scribbles said is like, if it's your MAGFest, if you're being active, then it should apply as well to those people as it does to the board or to department heads or anybody else.
We shouldn't treat every person that comes and doesn't volunteer as just a commodity, though. Like,
Well-
Absolutely, but we have 20,000 people. How many of those are going to read core values?
they don't have to read them. They just have to be like supported.
I mean, well, I
I
got.
don't necessarily think that these preclude public facing, I think you may be able to add a bullet point to each of them to clarify how it's public facing. But like participation, like from an internal perspective, it's mandating us to break down your
I was wondering where's pizza? New topic.
I don't care anymore. There's pizza.
Yeah.
All right. So that particular bullet point is mandating us as
Yeah, we have to do this, so we're not
organization-
MAGfest.
as an organization, as volunteers to break down barriers. But you could very easily put in another bullet point there saying, like, as an attendee, you are part of the event, so put a piece of you into it. For sincerity, you know, enthusiasm takes precedence over mass appeal. We could put something like, you know, like it's a holistic approach. You're there because you want the whole thing. You're not there just because you want to see one guest. Like the type of attendees we want are people that just aren't there for a stop on a concert tour. They're there because they want to see the unique things. Support. I mean, you're supporting everybody around you. Like, you're not jumping to grab the swag that they're throwing out at the booth. You're there to meet new people. Like our tournaments, for Christ's sake. You know, we don't give prizes really. We give the endpoints because we're there to support each other, teach each other to play games. We're not there to just stomp on someone and get the video card and get the fuck out. Like I think each one of these things is you can add a bullet point to it, but I don't think they're.
Like what I was saying and what you guys are saying, I think with a little massaging, we can look at this and change the language a little bit to serve as the sort of public-facing thing that you're talking about. And I think that's a lot more conversations, and I'm very happy to have those conversations with you and everybody. Yeah, for sure. But it's
Right.
gonna be kind of hard to twist this into that right now. You know?
Yeah, although I will say, I think that the public, I think I agree that the public version, like for attendees, would be very close to this. I mean, there are a couple of bullet points up there that, you know, I don't know that we would say failure is a necessary step in growth and development, just to like every attendee that comes in. And, you know.
No. I wholeheartedly disagree on that because I think attendees should know going to this event that shit's gonna fuck up, and they should rejoice in that.
No, it's a good point.
I want to make one other quick point, and then I want us to break for pizza, which is this, right?
Well, I'm the boss.
Thank you for not dropping the mic before you walked off.
These are $50 microphones.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess the only other thing, Hachi, I would say this too. This is also a map of like priorities, right? So it's like there's room for more in MAGfest in the cracks that doesn't exactly conform to this. So we could point to a whole bunch of different examples, like I mean, not to, I don't know, whatever, like cosplay, right? This doesn't say anything about cosplay, but it exists. It's cool. People can do stuff, and there's room for it. But if you had to choose between that and a like gaming-related thing or a more on-mission thing, the core values tell you what the priority is, I guess.
Like maybe we're just weird and different, and we have.
We are.
And we have a bunch of the internal core values that build to the headlines, and maybe we change one or two of them. But like community, experimentation, participation, and sincerity all could work for public stuff.
Sure.
It's like when you
Yeah.
MAGfest, you'll see a sincere event. When you, and then the support also means what I said earlier about treating attendees with respect. Experimentation means what you just said, which we should not. Maybe we'll shift the experimentation away from experience to like some other sort of thing. But like it's not always going to be perfect. And then the community thing too. So this could be an internal, external thing. We can show the community how we get from us to them, and it could just be one document. Like
Right, and
that
exactly,
could work
and
really
that's,
well.
that's where we've been coming from, is like, this can go public, this can get posted, and the public can look at it, and the merely observing attendee can look at these core values and see, okay, this is how these guys are building this event, this sets up a framework for what I can expect. So, like, as far as I've been concerned when dealing with core values so far, I haven't even been thinking about the issue that you raised because I figured that document would serve the purpose. If somebody looks at it, they should be able to understand.
Or the reason companies make core values, having internal core values that then, you know, make something nice to go to the public, is still serving
super quick housekeeping. Josiah.
All right, raise your hand if you have any kind of dietary restriction, i.e. no dairy, you're a vegan, you're gluten-free. All right, so look at the people